They never saw it coming. One moment, the legendary daytime hosts were trading their usual banter, exchanging commentary on the political news of the day as if they were untouchable gatekeepers of truth. The next moment, the rise of a fresh-faced, no-nonsense White House press secretary would leave them reeling. This is the story of how Karoline Leavitt shook The View to its core, forcing them to confront the very bias and hypocrisy they've denied for years. Welcome to BuzzFeed Celebs, where we dive into the hottest controversies lighting up the headlines. Today, we're peeling back the layers of a feud that reveals just how fragile mainstream media control can be when it's challenged by someone who refuses to play by their rules. Buckle up, because this saga offers drama, irony, and more than a few shocking twists.
These women are completely out of touch with reality, and you're right, ABC should wake up.
She's probably been put in there because according to Donald Trump, she's a 10. You know that's what it is.
Democrats in the media are now unloading all their nasty attacks on rising Trump White House star and new press secretary, Karoline Leavitt. Watch this.
Things came to a head when Joy Behar, known for her outspoken personality on The View, made comments that ignited an immediate backlash. Instead of acknowledging Karoline's achievements or discussing her policies, Joy zeroed in on her appearance, essentially belittling her success by reducing it to trivial factors like looks. Suddenly, Joy's feminist rhetoric stood side by side with a glaring contradiction. How can a person who claims to champion women's empowerment disregard a young woman's professional merit and focus on superficial traits? The hypocrisy lit up social media.
Joy Behar calls her a 10. I mean, how dare she objectify a woman with a sexist rating system, but it's such a typical thing from a 1.5.
Especially among viewers who'd grown tired of seeing successful women objectified. Karoline's reaction: she refused to dignify such pettiness and kept her focus on the bigger picture, accountability in the media, and real issues facing the nation. But that wasn't the whole story. Outrage wouldn't be complete without another round of deflection, finger-pointing, and spin from The View panel. Instead of offering an apology or even acknowledging that Joy's remarks might have been out of line, the co-hosts leapt to each other's defense. They tried to brush aside the controversy and move on, but the public had already noticed. The seeds of tension were firmly planted, and Karoline's readiness to call out media hypocrisy was on full display. People began asking, if The View truly cares about women's rights, why not uplift a young trailblazer, even if they disagree with her politics? If Joy's remark was the first domino, Whoopi Goldberg's retort was the next in line. She came to Joy's defense, but went about it in a rather roundabout way, launching into a convoluted monologue about wokeness, civil rights, and how younger generations supposedly benefit from the hard-fought battles of the past.
Because she said something yesterday that really pissed me off. And that was, she said, there will be no wokeness here.
Oh, yeah.
Let me explain something to you. Because without that wokeness, you might not have that job. Women were not invited to that table. Mm-hmm. Women were not invited to many tables in this nation. The reason we fought and busted our behinds to make sure that you didn't have to worry about this. And now to hear you talk about it and to hear anybody talk about the wokeness was put in place for a reason.
She implied that Karoline's criticism of wokeness was dismissing the historical struggle for equality, conflating modern-day political correctness with the civil rights movements of earlier decades. Karoline, however, wasted no time dismantling that argument. She pointed out that weaponizing the term wokeness to blur the lines between actual civil rights efforts and the current wave of divisive political correctness does no favors for genuine social progress. From Karoline's perspective, wokeness can sometimes be a vehicle for ideological policing, stifling nuanced debate under the guise of moral superiority. Whoopi's conflation, Karoline argued, was either a misunderstanding of her stance or a deliberate attempt to manipulate viewers. And what happened next would shock everyone. Whoopi doubled down, suggesting that Karoline owed her newfound position to the very wokeness she criticized, implying that if previous social justice battles hadn't been fought, Karoline wouldn't have the right to stand at the press secretary's podium. This moment became a flashpoint, laying bare the tension between legacy media personalities who see themselves as gatekeepers and newer figures, like Karoline, who are far more direct about calling out double standards. The conversation devolved into a polarizing back and forth, with Karoline calmly insisting that conflating wokeness with civil rights is intellectually dishonest.
Because black people couldn't get into colleges. because women could not get into the colleges they wanted to go to. This is all women.
How ironic that Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar and the rest of the ladies on The View spend their time calling Republicans the conspiracy theorists, but they have been wrong about everything they have said over the last couple of years.
But the swirl of controversy didn't stop there. In a bizarre turn, The View hosts also found a way to drag Elon Musk into the conversation, lobbing accusations that vaguely linked him to extreme or even dangerous incidents, claims that lacked substance and verifiable proof. This pivot seemed like an attempt to paint a broad picture of right-leaning figures or wealthy contrarians as sinister. After all, Elon Musk had publicly criticized certain mainstream narratives, making him an easy target for sensationalist remarks. Karoline seized on this tactic, pointing out how the show's eagerness to pin unproven conspiracy theories on Musk contrasted sharply with their frequent condemnation of conservative conspiracy theorists. She reminded viewers of the many times mainstream outlets, including The View, had peddled inaccuracies or misjudgments in their coverage. The double standard, in her view, was blatant. It's acceptable for them to toss around unverified accusations against Elon Musk, but unacceptable for conservatives to question the official narratives presented by large networks. Of course, as soon as Karoline spotlighted this inconsistency, the show's hosts scrambled to defend themselves. They insisted that they had no intention of spreading conspiracies, only to be met with a growing chorus of skeptics who felt otherwise. Once again, Karoline's strategy of exposing legacy media bias gained even more traction. The hosts tried to dismiss her accusations as a misunderstanding or a sign that Karoline can't take a joke, but that fell flat when actual clips confirmed the conspiratorial tone of their conversation about Musk. Watching this all play out, it became clear that something deeper was happening.
They likened President Trump to Hitler. They have mocked him. They have shamed him. They have lied about him consistently on their show. And it was a joy to watch them on November the 6th when they realized that tens of millions of Americans do not listen to the lies that they have spewed.
The president doesn't surround himself by anybody smart. And Joy Behar and those guys, of course this was going to happen. This is why conservative women just have to move on, do their thing, and not worry about the criticism from folks like at The View.
And we are expecting the media to be hostile.
The View, like many daytime talk shows, thrives on provocative commentary, but usually manages to spin events in a way that preserves their image. Karoline's directness, however, made that spin far more difficult. She was systematically dismantling their talking points in real time, leaving them with few safe rhetorical corners to retreat to. For years, mainstream media outlets held near total power over what narratives the public consumed. They could selectively highlight stories that supported their preferred angles and downplay others that might challenge their viewpoint. But now, alternative platforms, ranging from YouTube channels to independent journalists, give audiences fresh perspectives that legacy media often ignore. Karoline's arrival in the White House press office was just the tipping point, a sign of a new era in which official statements no longer flow through the same old mainstream filters unchallenged. But that wasn't the whole story either. Viewers began noticing the irony that these very hosts, who once positioned themselves as champions of free speech and accountability, were now openly opposing any shift in the press landscape that might hold them accountable. The meltdown happening on The View was symbolic of a broader struggle within American media, a fight between the comfort of established norms and the disruptive force of new voices that won't simply bow down to conventional wisdom.
She was conflating two ideas. This word wokeness didn't look like she really understood what it meant, or certainly the way Karoline Leavitt meant it when she made that statement, and she was conflating it with civil rights and how women didn't have the right to vote and own property and all of that. That has nothing to do with wokeness, which is, of course, about putting people in there because of their immutable characteristics rather than the merit that they bring to the table.
Then came Karoline's masterstroke, revamping the entire press pool setup within the White House. Historically, legacy media power players like the Associated Press or the major TV networks had near total control of the front rows, dominating the Q&A sessions and setting the tone for press briefings. Karoline changed that by granting two prominent front row seats to new or alternative outlets. Reporters who previously might have been relegated to the back rows or not allowed in at all. Suddenly, the old hierarchy was blown wide open. No longer could high-profile correspondents from national networks steer every conversation. Karoline insisted that alternative alternative media deserved a fair shot at asking questions and receiving clear, direct answers. She reinstated press passes for hundreds of journalists the previous administration had revoked, expanding the circle of who gets to hold officials accountable. The reaction from The View was predictably furious. They saw it as a direct challenge to the legitimacy of traditional media, which in some ways, it was. If more reporters and platforms come to the table, the show's favored narratives might face deeper scrutiny than ever before. And what happened next would shock everyone. Instead of quietly adapting or respectfully debating the merits of Karoline's approach, The View escalated the rhetoric, warning that opening the door to new media sources would lead to unqualified people spouting stuff. The irony was almost too rich. After all, these very hosts often push poorly vetted claims themselves, relying on sensational commentary to reel in audiences. For them to worry about unqualified voices seemed more like fear of competition than genuine concern for journalistic integrity. As if the tension weren't high enough, The View hosts attempted a classic gotcha moment on the issue of illegal immigration. They questioned Karoline about the number of arrests Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, ICE, had made since President Trump returned to office, demanding she differentiate between those with criminal records and those simply in the country without proper documentation. The line of questioning was designed to corner Karoline, painting Trump's policies as heartless or excessively punitive. But Karoline refused to stumble. With composure, she reminded them that entering the country illegally is, by definition, breaking the law. She didn't shy away from acknowledging the human complexity of immigration, but maintained that any sovereign nation must uphold its legal processes. For a panel that expected to catch her off balance, Karoline's confident counter turned the moment on its head. The gotcha attempt only reinforced her stance, illustrating once again that she was more than prepared to address policy intricacies head on. The hosts, perhaps sensing they'd lost that particular round, pivoted to emotional appeals, suggesting that caring about families means not labeling illegal entry as criminal activity. Karoline stood firm, clarifying that compassion and rule of law aren't mutually exclusive. She reminded them that every administration, regardless of party, has had to grapple with complex immigration challenges. Demonizing one side for political points doesn't solve anything, she insisted. And with that, the conversation fell flat for The View. They'd hoped to rattle Karoline. Instead, she used their question to spotlight a consistent principle. Throughout this entire saga, Karoline's overarching argument was crystal clear. The mainstream media has enjoyed years of unchecked influence, shaping public opinion with minimal accountability. Now that individuals like her are pushing for transparency and calling out misinformation, the gatekeepers of conventional narratives are in panic mode. From calling her a glorified 10 to misconstruing her points about wokeness, the hosts seem more interested in undermining her credibility than engaging with her points. Karoline highlighted each and every instance where The View twisted reality to fit a certain agenda. She reminded them of the times they had labeled President Trump with extreme language, likening him to historical villains without evidence, painting conservative policies as outright oppression, or marginalizing half the electorate by calling them uneducated or backward. It was all fair game in her eyes because she believed that any show claiming to be about viewpoints should at least strive for consistency. But that wasn't the whole story either. The meltdown we see now on The View is bigger than just Joy Behar's remarks or Whoopi's misguided conflations. It represents a mainstream institution grappling with the reality that they can't monopolize public discourse anymore. Karoline's stance and the movement of alternative media sources are democratizing how Americans receive their news. Viewers now compare multiple narratives and reach their own conclusions. Legacy shows, once secure in their dominance, now face a choice: adapt or face irrelevance. Why does any of this matter? It matters because public trust in media is at an all-time low, and that trust wasn't eroded overnight. People have grown tired of watching talk show segments that pretend to champion free expression while canceling, dismissing, or demeaning dissenting voices. They're fed up with networks that selectively report stories to fit a carefully orchestrated narrative only to claim objectivity when challenged. Karoline Leavitt's arrival at the center of the national stage crystallized these frustrations. Every time she calls out misinformation, she's inviting the public to look closer and question more deeply. And every time The View responds by deflecting or launching personal attacks, they reinforce the idea that they're unwilling to be held accountable. This breakdown in civil discourse isn't just an isolated TV drama, it's a reflection of wider cultural conflicts about who gets to shape reality. If The View, with its influential platform, refuses to adapt, it may find itself increasingly on the losing end of public opinion. The pressing question is, what happens now? Will The View recognize that repeatedly doubling down on personal smears and condescending lectures only furthers the divide with viewers who crave honesty and nuanced debate? Or will they continue down this path, losing credibility with each instance of hypocrisy? Karoline doesn't show any sign of letting up. In her eyes, exposing media bias is part of her role, a responsibility she undertook the moment she agreed to be press secretary. She's stated publicly that she intends to keep shining a light on inaccuracies wherever she sees them, from front row seats for alternative journalists to direct call-outs of falsehoods. Her approach signals the dawn of a new relationship between the White House and the press. It's not about being combative for its own sake. It's about ensuring that no single group, whether it's The View or a major news conglomerate, can distort the truth without pushback. But that wasn't the whole story either. The broader media landscape is shifting rapidly, meaning we're going to see more conflicts like this in the future. New voices are empowered by digital platforms. Audiences, armed with instant fact-checking tools on their phones, no longer rely on a few big networks to learn what's happening. If The View hosts truly want to remain relevant, they might want to consider constructive engagement. Their current strategy of belittling, shaming, or misrepresenting voices that challenge them only undermines their influence further. We've come a long way, peeling back the layers of drama swirling around Karoline Leavitt and her very public feud with The View. At every turn, she's challenged the show's hosts on issues of transparency, consistency, and respect. Her rise to the role of press secretary wasn't just an appointment, it was the beginning of a new era where legacy media no longer holds the only microphone. Whether it's Joy Behar's underhanded jabs, Whoopi Goldberg's conflation of wokeness and civil rights, or the entire panel's attempt to corner her on controversial topics, Karoline has held her ground. In doing so, she's laid bare the insecurities and biases lurking behind the polished facade of daytime television. Yet, as with any major shift, the question remains, will The View evolve, or is it barreling toward an inevitable loss of relevance? For years, it has shaped conversations across America, swaying opinions by leveraging its mainstream platform. But times are changing, and so is the public's tolerance for unchallenged media narratives. Karoline's stance, along with similar pushes from other emerging public figures, is a warning sign. Adapt to the new expectations of transparency and fairness, or watch your influence evaporate. Let's be real, this story is far from over. As the White House continues to empower alternative outlets and hold the old guard accountable, the controversies will only grow. The tension between Karoline and The View will likely flare up again, each side vying to win the argument in the court of public opinion. In the meantime, viewers worldwide are tuning in, forming their own judgments, and recognizing that the once unchallenged reign of legacy media is no longer guaranteed. And with that, we wrap up today's deep dive. Now it's your turn to weigh in. Are we witnessing the final act of mainstream media dominance? Or do you think The View and similar outlets will find a way to pivot and maintain their power? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Let's keep the conversation going, because this is bigger than a single feud. It's about the evolving relationship between those who produce the news and those who consume it. Before you go, make sure to subscribe to BuzzFeed Celebs for more eye-opening stories and hard-hitting breakdowns of the latest controversies shaking up Hollywood, politics, and everything in between. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. And if you found this analysis riveting, give us a thumbs up to show your support, and drop a comment telling us what you'd like to see next. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep questioning the narratives that shape our world.